My name is Zyan Dixon, and I'm founder of Gaia Metrics. And our motto is modernizing climate accountability through data. So our expertise is in consolidating complex emissions data from multiple sources, including company self-reporting and transportation and energy data sets, into a clear and standardized system that ensures accurate and transparent emissions tracking. Gaia Analytics envisions a future where climate accountability is transparent, data-driven, and actionable. We believe that to improve our environment, we need fair and accurate information to be shared responsibly. So Gaia Analytics was born out of a simple but urgent realization, and that's that Louisiana faces environmental challenges, but the data needed to solve those problems isn't often coherent and together. So, the problem is that major corporations operate across the state and they contribute a significant amount of emissions, but there's no centralized reporting to hold anyone accountable for that. The numbers exist, but they aren't connected in any way to have action. Rather than accepting that gap, we decided to build a solution which is Gaia Analytics, which is created to turn climate data into a tool for change. And our mission is clear: if you can measure it fairly, you can manage it effectively. We believe with the right tools, Louisiana can become a model state for data-driven environmental accountability, and not just for one industry, but for the future of every community in the nation. So our values are that taking care of the environment is a responsibility and privilege, and our planet sustains every community and every business. So, and we're committed to honoring that relationship through meaningful action. And now I'll go to our second about SPI. So SPI is our Sustainability Performance Index, and it takes in a lot of data sets to calculate what is a company's emissions relative to its revenue. So an example would be Walmart, which has an estimated SPI of 375 the tons of CO2 per $1 million. And SPI works because it promotes fairness and it compares companies of different sizes on a level playing field. So, of course, a company worth billions of dollars is going to have more emissions each year, but relative to its revenue size, it might actually be percentage-wise not as high relative to a smaller business, because a smaller business might actually contribute more emissions relative to its smaller size. And transparency turns the raw emissions into clear public data metrics. And we support legislation and policy that targets emission reduction goals. And accountability makes our environmental impact visible to businesses, governments, and the public. So we have an SPI tier system which works in a way that it scores companies into tiers. So each tier reflects an environmental performance and comes with clear reduction targets and incentives. So of course, if you're a tier 1 company, that means that you fall in the SPI range of 0 to 100, and you have a low impact. So the required action by Gaia and the state would be just to maintain your performance and continue your efficiency. But if you're a company who falls within, say, tier 3, you have an elevated impact, and there'd be required action of reducing emissions by 5 to 10%, either by a certain section of the company. So let's say transportation over a span of 1 or 2 years, or it'd be something like your electricity that you have each year. And if you're a tier 5 company, that means that your SPI range is 1,000 plus, and that would be a critical impact level. And those are companies who would fall within maybe the fossil fuel range and energy sector. And for those companies, we have a higher standard and decreasing your emissions for each year or every few years. And there's possible penalties if you don't meet those standards. So some data sets that we use would be kilowatts per hour per location, and it's your waste each year, which is perishable or non-biodegradable waste output, and we take into account your revenue at the state level and things like transportation of goods and the gasoline. And the gasoline necessary to transport all those goods. Also, your facility size and your number of employees. So, the incentives and accountability measures for companies, because to reduce your carbon input, it of course takes a lot of effort and money. So, we would advocate for tax incentives for companies who meet or exceed goals. And of course, there will be repercussions for companies in the tier 4 to 5 non-compliance who don't meet those goals. And you can have access to grants and green infrastructure programs to help your company and certify it, and it is meeting its criteria each year. And you have public reporting and recognition for tier 1 to 2 leaders. So your target impact on businesses would be, if you fall within tier 1, it's just to maintain or improve because you don't impact the environment in a way that is as significant. So and you have minimal oversight each year. If you fall within tier 3, that means that your reduction target might fall within 5 to 10% of emissions every few years or each year. And you have moderate oversight and auditing for your company. And your impact goal would just be medium improvements. If you fall within the tier 5 range, your reduction targets are much severe, and there will be penalties if not compliant. And your impact goals are major emissions cuts, so that could be maybe shutting down of plants or tax penalties if you don't meet those goals. If tier 4 and 5 companies achieve even a 10% reduction over the next 2 years, Louisiana could reduce its total CO2 emissions by more than 1.5 million tons annually. And our approach works because it's collaborative. Gaia Metrics aligns the interests of large corporations, state regulators, and environmental organizations through clear goals and transparent reporting. And there's about 45,000 businesses in the state of Louisiana, large and small. And if we can find ways to help them reduce their emissions, it will also save them money. And here's an example of our SPI dashboard. So of course you would input all of your data, and the algorithm would give you the name of your company, what sector you fall into, and your SPI index. So of course, for Exxon it has here that it falls within the SPI index of 750. So it will have that's a tier 4 company each year. And Walmart, like I said, would fall within the range of about tier 3. The goal of Gaia Analytics is to scale up and to not just be a state company, but to scale up to being nationwide so that we can help businesses manage their emission reductions and help the planet improve.